I really like, so you mentioned like weakness, right? And how much, like, I don't want to be a weak person.
Right.
And I think that very quickly gets contextualized as like toxic masculinity or just arrogance. Like, oh, so weakness is a bad thing?
Right.
So if I were to tell you, Kurt, is weakness a bad thing? What would you say?
Weakness is a bad thing if you don't do anything about it. And if it is weakness in a sense of, like, that you can control. If your weakness is, oh, I care about this person, and so I'm sad when they do something that hurts my feelings, or somebody dies, or you just have certain things that are important to you, that kind of weakness is almost a strength. You can gain strength from that weakness because it's motivating, it's a fuel.
Yeah.
But weakness in the sense of, like, I don't have any thick skin, you know? Thick in your skin, that's part of being, like, not a masculine, it's part of being a masculine guy is to grow thick skin and realize if somebody says something to me, it's also like, I guess being compassionate is being masculine almost. Because, like you said, because you have to be compassionate in the sense that this person is probably insecure if they're coming at me for this reason. I need to be confident enough and have a thick enough skin to realize that what they say to me does not matter. It's not going to even move me an inch. I'm like a tree. I'm going to stay exactly where I am no matter what is said to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into like philosophical principles, a lot of them bleed together, which I think is cool, but at least in the Buddhist Eastern sense, is that compassion is the furthest height. It's like as far as you can possibly go with like being a strong person. Because it's one thing, and you also get this a lot with Christianity, it's one thing to like, I did something wrong to you, right? And then you forgive me for that. Like, okay, you're not going to actively hate me. That's strong, right? Because like everyone wants to hate a little bit. Like it's easy to hate, and it feels good. Like literally psychologically, it feels good to hate people. But with that compassion aspect, it's saying don't just forgive people, also want the best for them. Like when you think about it, like if you think about the people who like burnt you the worst, and the bare minimum isn't don't hate them. The bare minimum is like no, want the best for them. Like do that, live that, and like how profoundly difficult that is. But once you have compassion for those kinds of people, you realize that like how badly can someone that I want the best for hurt me? You know what I mean?
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. Right. It's one of those things.
Like you said, like it's easier for to hate somebody.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of, this is kind of related to it's definitely related to what we've been talking about. Like it's easier to be comfortable. Like hating somebody is more comfortable than having compassion.
Absolutely.
And that goes into multiple things. It's more comfortable to sit on your ass and do nothing all day, and not go to the gym, or not try to look inward and realize that there are problems with you. It's easier. It's more comfortable.
Absolutely.
And people come into this misconception of if it's comfortable, that means it must be good. Because my brain, I am my brain. You're not your brain.
No.
I believe in a soul. You know? And I think that you are your soul. And although your brain may be chemically telling you that I'm comfortable, I like being lazy, I like sitting around doing nothing, I don't want to change who I am because that's too hard. It's like that is your mind's trying to limit you, and you're greater than your mind's capacity. You are so much greater. Your soul, your spirit, like your consciousness, whatever, that is in control of everything else. This is just flesh. But that is something greater, and whether you believe in God or something else, that is definitely like who you are. It's not your body or your mind.
That's a fantastic distinction. That like in almost every single philosophical religious tradition, there is a separation between like you, the observer, and then like what like I mean sometimes it's considered like like your sinful desires, but like a Peterson-esque thing. One thing he once said is that like if the true goal of humankind was happiness, we'd all be heroin addicts.
Exactly.
You know, it's like
be a bunch of heroin rapists.
It's like if the point of life was just the immediate amount of like dopamine release, then like sure we wouldn't really do much. But and then that turns into this like false argument of like okay, so like what am I supposed to do? Just like suffer all the time? But the flip side of that is, and people say like it's easier to do nothing. I've always seen it as like you're doing nothing, but you also acknowledge how miserable you are for doing nothing. So how easy is it really? Is it easier to like get up and people get very like flavorful about that, the very inspirational, like get up and like was it Kevin Goggins?
David Goggins.
David Goggins, yeah.
Who's gonna carry the boat? Who's gonna carry the boat? Oh!
Yeah. It's like yeah, that sounds nice, right? Like if it was that simple, and like obviously he's not saying it's that simple,
right?
But sometimes it is, right? But like true happiness is found in that like struggle to be better,
right.
And I don't think that's talked about or even like agreed upon in our culture, which is baffling to me. Because to me, and this is like a more so my arrogance, or maybe I give myself too much the benefit of the doubt, but it's like I would just assume, especially with like TikTok, like comfort is obviously not the way to go, right? If comfort was the way to go, we have all of the comfort that we've ever had in the history of mankind.
And people are more depressed.
Right. Yeah. So like, do you think, like, how so do you think the that sort of adventure or that conflict, like, do you think that's necessary, or do you think there is a way to be like a better person without that conflict?
No, I think it's 100% necessary. I think that is, like, people talk about the meaning of life or whatever.
Yeah,
that is my purpose in life, is to constantly just be combating myself. You should be at war with yourself. Like, when people say look in the mirror, they're not saying just look at your flaw, look at what's wrong with you. They're saying that's your enemy. That is the person that you need to fight. I remember when I was a kid, I used to box on a boxing trainer. His name was Panama. He was from Panama. And he had two lazy eyes.
Yeah.
He was this like older black guy. He was really cool, really nice. And he had a thick accent.
Yeah.
And he always used to say, like before we started boxing, he would go, look in the mirror. And I was like, why? And he was like, because that's who you're fighting every single time you step in the ring of life. And I was like, the ring of life? He was like, yes. He was like, every single day of your life, that is who you're in competition with. Yeah. That is who you need to beat. That is who is trying to stop you. Your brain, your body wants you to be comfortable. It wants you to live in this. It wants you to scroll on TikTok for hours, like you said, dopamine. But your soul, who you really are, just can't stand it.
Yeah, I think I really like this quote, psychoanalyst Nietzsche, who's like, he who has a why can bear any how. So I think there's a lot of like, why should you do it, right? Like, obviously everyone knows, like, I know why I should exercise, I know why I should do these things. But then you get to the point of, okay, time to go do it, right? What are you going to do? And I think it's unfair to say, go to the average person who is suffering a lot and say, all right, go ahead, be Jesus, right? So like, for you, in like, I would assume that you accredit yourself as like one who tries to better himself.
Sure.
So like,
not always successful.
Absolutely not.
Slumps. I fall into like these depressive slumps where I'm just like, where I'm playing a lot of video games, or I'm just like not really as on my grind as I was in the past. Yeah, but that's not the point, right? The point isn't results. The point is like to always be doing it, right? Yeah. So like for you, what was like your first experience with like, all right, I have a standard I'm going to hold myself to, and then what was that like trying to piece together how to actually live up to that standard? When I first like started lifting, nobody's in shape. Because you're still skinny for months, for years. Yeah. You're still skinny until eventually you get to a point where like people would come up to me and they'd be like, they ask me things about the gym, and my standard became who I was in those people's eyes.
Yeah.
Like, people are asking me questions, they're looking up to me. They expect us. Somebody knock at the door?
Yeah. I don't know if it's Delosa or not. Oh, it's Delosa. I might be locked.
Hello. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
We got some come through and make some copies.
I know he's trying to but I've got to make copies.
I'm not a spiritual, I'm not a religious person.
Sorry, maybe we interrupted. Anyway.
Interrupted. Now we're talking about God.
Now we're back talking about God.
I think there's, I've been like listening to a lot of things and so on and so forth. I always have a fascination with any thought process or any like thought culture, any philosophy, right? And this, you can't call religion just a philosophy, because the biggest difference I've come to learn is that like Stoicism never claimed that like
they wasn't claiming that it was like
exactly right. Here. Like the unique thing with religion, is particularly in Christianity, particularly with Islam, is that like they say that this is a philosophy because it came from something beyond human, right? And because it came from something beyond human, it now warrants like to be subordinate to, and that's a very fascinating concept of like, because first off, I don't think the idea of subordinating concepts, right, something to abide by, is very popular. I think people want to be like, I'm my own boss. I'm not gonna like Christians, like I'm not gonna live by a bunch of rules.
Exactly.
people live by subordinate policies. Like, they have their own things that they're subordinate to. It's just a matter of, like, are you aware of them?
Well, I think you see that with some people who say, like, they're atheists. It's like, are you really an atheist?
Yeah.
You really thought it through. Like, you can be an atheist if you come to the logical conclusion of, or the spiritual conclusion that this is just not, you just don't believe in this certain thing. But if you're just an atheist because, like, I know a lot of people who are just atheists because they hate God. They just, like, have a hatred for God. They're like, bad things in the world happen, so obviously I should be an atheist. It's like, that doesn't mean that you're an atheist. It just means you haven't really thought about it.
Well, I think that's, I mean, I'm not, so, like, when you get to a conversation where it's not a staunch atheist and a staunch, like, religious person, if that's not the conversation, then there's obviously going to be, like, a leaning bias of, like, what is and isn't, right? Mm-hmm. But in the way of, like, for those who would listen and are those self-described atheists, right? For me personally, I remember there was a time where, like, if I hear the word Christian, I'm mentally checked out, right? Like, I'm not fucking, that is
that was like that for a time.
Yeah. What I would say, though, to the not to, like, to get into apologetics, but, like, what made me what I found my sort of spirituality was with like, is it hasty to say X, Y, and Z isn't real?
Right.
I think yes, right? And I think difference in opinion or not, difference in beliefs or not, difference in religion, whatever. But then when it comes down to, like, okay, I hate God.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Exactly.
Do you mean I hate the notion of God? First off, do you have a notion of God? Maybe.
Exactly.
Or do you hate the, like, couple, like, crazy staunch evangelical fundamentalists that read the Bible and go, homophobia based.
People forget that I've recently been delving into Christianity a lot more.
Yeah.
I'm starting to go to church a little bit. Like, I usually was turned off to it because my, like, grandparents are, like, super, like, like, and people don't realize that people are not God.
You would think that that's obvious.
People who describe themselves as Christian, as having a relationship with God, are not what it means to be Christian, because they are of, I mean, I sound super like Christian, but they are of sin, they are of human nature, so they're not going to be perfectly representing what it means. You have to find it out for yourself. You can't just go to church and listen to a pastor and this is religion, this is Christianity. Like, no, it's a personal thing. It's between you and God, if you believe in that. And I've recently been starting to really, like, explore my belief in that, and I've definitely been, like, growing more Christian and Christian. Like, I used to be like, oh, I'm spiritual. I had conversations with you, like, oh, I believe in something. Now I'm like, I'm starting to become, like, a Christian. Like, I genuinely do believe in certain things, because I realized that, like I said, my grandmother, she's very, like, tells everyone she's a Christian. She tells everyone.
It's very proud.
If you look at the Bible, and if you look at what it means and what Jesus was really trying to say, whether you believe in it or not, I'm just saying, if you look at it just from, like,
if you were to read it as a philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. He was trying to say that you have to belittle yourself to God. You are less than. You have to being Christian means to accept that there is something wrong with you, that you are not perfect, and to ask for forgiveness and to be humble in front of God. It's not your job to judge. You're not the judge. God is the judge. You're on trial. And what is your place for, like, you see these old Christian ladies, what is your place to put everyone else on trial when you're on trial too? Like, it's like saying, like, you're on trial for murder and you're telling everybody else they're murderers. That's not how it works. And that is why I think turns people off to religion a lot. But if you really look at it and try to explore with an open mind on your own and just appreciate the values that it brings, it can be really beautiful.
I think, and what I would do, I am not a Christian. I have profound respect for that, like, and for all religious traditions, because, like, there's you can make the argument, like, how fake can something be if millions of people live by it? So it's like, I would never go so far as to just begin to degrade, like, the entire religion. You can't do that wisely, right? But for me personally, and maybe this borders on sacrilege, but when you start thinking about some of the common, like, Christianity is a good example of, like, the principles and tenets of Christianity. You can almost certainly, I found in my experience, relate those to something using different words, right? So, like you made the really, really good example of, like, oh, I sound like such a Christian for using the word sin. Replace that. So sin literally means to miss the mark. Like, that's the translation, right?
I'm just using that word because it's short and sweet.
Exactly. And, like, to think that, like, you have to you have to use different words and not these religious words. They mean all the same.
Exactly.
And that gets interesting because it's like to say everyone is of sin. So then someone may go like, oh, well, you're just enforcing your religious beliefs on me. If you think about that, again, one of those like critical thinking things.
Yeah, it's like if you just use a different word, it's the same thing.
And then, but how cool is that? Not even in the way of like, I'm right, you're wrong, but just in the way of like, we can relate very deeply if we just ask each other what these words mean and how we're using them.
Exactly.
And then you get to the idea of being like subordinate to God. What God is something not even religious people debate about, but like let's just say like a common ism or rhetoric is like if you could relate God to like being all encompassing or like the ideal self of like
Seems like a force.
right yeah like literally or like to be like Jesus, to be Christly is like that humility, like you said, that humility, that compassion, that forgiveness.
Warmth.
Yeah, exactly like. And that's when you start getting into the like where it's hard to talk to someone that is so not spiritual, right? Is that like you said, that warmth? You can't describe it much further than that because it's a very individualized experience. But just as simple as like if you're an atheist and I'm a Christian, like we can be talking about being humble, being a better person. Like I talked about earlier, like self-improvement, like things to be supported, to be compassion. It's just a matter of how you get there, right? And like that's what a lot of Christianity and a lot of religious tradition is. I think it's a shame, as someone who's not religious, I think it's a shame that people so quickly go like, my uncle was homophobic, and now God sucks.
And people don't even realize, that's what I hate about like I think that in our generation we're seeing a downfall of Christianity, and it
Statistically, yes.
yeah, and it makes me a little upset as someone who's started to become like more
Sure,
Christian.
yeah.
And it's because it's other Christians' fault. Because I mean, I
Yeah.
think that they're not actually Christian people. They think they're Christian because
Yeah.
they think it's like almost like a herd mentality.
Yeah.
They don't actually have a relationship with God. They don't actually understand why they believe what they believe.
Yeah.
They just say, oh, everyone else says that if you're gay, you're gonna burn in hell. And that, you know, if you voted for Joe Biden, you're sinful. It's like, It's like, no. If you look at these things, the whole root of the whole religion is humility, forgiveness, compassion.
Yeah.
It tells you things are sins. Sin meaning a fault, like you said.
Yep, just missing the mark. That's
Like
it.
a fault. Christianity says that being homosexual is a fault. It's not saying you're gonna die, you're a terrible person, and burn in hell. It says lying is a fault.
Just missing the mark.
It's putting these things on the same plane.
Yeah.
And just to say that, like, to say things to the extreme, you're destroying your own religion.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. I don't like saying that.
That is something that upsets me. Of like it's a meme how Christians don't agree with certain verses, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to think that like just playing like the atheist role, just to say that like oh well my grandma is a crazy Christian, right? Even though there's like what I think in the 20s of like popular denominations. Not only does my grandma have it all figured out, so she speaks for the entirety of Christianity and speaks for God. Right. So she's got it figured out. And now I've decided that she understands the entirety of this faith, so much so that I can now critique it based off of my grandma's opinion. Right? Like that's the kind of loops you have to go through, and that's crazy.
Just like how, like you said, some people say they're atheists because they don't want to have power taken from them. So I think that some people say that they are Christian or Muslim or whatever because they want power. They want to feel like they're God.
Yeah.
Like, these people do not believe in God. They want to be God.
Yeah.
If you're judging everybody and you're telling everybody everything they're doing wrong and that you're condemning these people, by doing that, you are putting yourself in the place of God. And so you're really just in it to feel powerful, not in it to feel what is really important, which is having humility, realizing your faults, trying to be a better person, just being humble.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
I think it's what that, funny enough, like relates to our original topic of like self-improvement, self-actualization, being a better person, right? Because where you can't call Christianity, for example, a philosophy is because like it's not that these are just principles to make yourself better, right? It's not that you're not just doing this because you want to be a better person. It's like to Scripture, that's your responsibility, right? And then you get into like the even crazier things of like, in the eyes of God or in the eyes of Jesus, like it's not that you have to be this better person. You are that better person, right? Like you are everything that you want to be, and you are as perfect as you ought to be. It's just a matter of living up to that, right?
Exactly. Because the world around you is making you into a worse version of yourself,
right?
Pure version of yourself.
Yeah. Have you heard of the whole like the statue of David and comparing yourself to perfection?
Right.
So like a marble Greek statue. Yeah. It's like, that is a reflection of, you know, that you're not some of those things. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're a lost cause and deserve the world to beat you for it. Exactly. But like to have that very clear cut, I ought to aspire to be that. And then people can ask like, well, why? Like, ask that about everything. Right. But like, you know, it's like,
and that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, why? Well, let's talk about why. Because that statue. And one could say you can decide that philosophically, right? The archetype of Jesus Christ is a archetype worth following. I would say, as a not Christian, the archetype of Jesus Christ is an archetype that I was living by. Right, exactly. It's like I was living that standard even before I became like any amount of religiously literate. But like, why would you say humility, compassion, and all forgiveness? Why would you want to live like that?
Right.
It's like, okay, so take that away. Take away those values. Take away that sort of archetype. What's going to replace it? Because something has to, right? You can't just say
greed. It's going to be envy.
Exactly.
It's going to be
You can't just say I'm free of all influences.
Yeah, and it really does tie into self-improvement, and that's why I have tried to been becoming more religious lately.
Yeah.
Is because like you just said, I just kind of came as you were speaking. I kind of came to this like conclusion in my head based on what you said, and it like kind of like when the light bulb went off. It's like you said, like the statue of David. It's like that is what we could be, right? It's like when we like according to like scripture or whatever, and like this is what I interpret it as.
Sure.
I'm just saying this is my philosophy tied into my religiousness in a sense.
Yeah.
It's like we are, like you said, we are that. We are greatness. So we are perfect.
Yeah.
We are pure. But like it says in the Bible, the world around us is sinful. It's full of faults. And so when you come into this world, you are torn down by other people. You're torn down by certain ideologies and stuff. And that's what makes you into a lesser person.
Yeah.
And so that's what religion is. That's what I believe religion is supposed to be, in the sense that you are asking God to help shield you, give you the strength to shield yourself from these outside influences that could be making you into a less person.
Yeah.
And that is self-improvement in itself, is denying something making you worse.
Yeah, I know for me personally, where I relate to that sort of like, the core of Christianity is your relationship with God. So whether or not, you say things, you don't know if you believe them, vice versa, but like, to me, I relate God in a sense to that like all-encompassing sort of like all goodness, right? That's sort of like moral standard you want to hold yourself to. If God encompasses, like if God is that moral standard, right? Like we all have that idea of I want to be a better person, I want to be a good person. Where does that come from? There's a lot of arguments. Where does that come from, right? And to me, how I relate to it is that like if God is the embodiment of that standard, you want to be subordinate to that standard. And choosing to be subordinate to that standard is real strength. That's not just like, well, I don't want free choice, right?
I think that's like almost the biggest logical argument for a higher power. Is this sort of moral sense of right and wrong. Yeah. It's like without even being taught what's right and wrong, in your deep down, somewhere you feel it. It's not your heart, it is your again, your soul, your spirit, your consciousness. And where like you said, with that moral standard, it's like that's the best logical argument for an existence of a higher power, is that moral standard.
Absolutely. That's it
doesn't come from your brain. I don't think it comes from like neurons.
Heroin comes from your brain.
Yeah, right.
It's like obviously not, right? Your brain did not think of God. If your brain thought of God, it'd be a nice comfy pillow.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to think that it's a conflict, that like perfection, not even perfection, because again, sin, missing the mark, but like if statue of David, God, right? It's like that's not easy. Because you have to see that and go, I'm not that. Right. And like, what are you going to do about that?
So if you had to conclude this by saying, these are the steps you should take in your life to become a better person and self-improve in your own way, what would you?
Read the Bible. I think it's just a matter of, figuring out where your faults are and say that's fine, right? But then you gotta start making a plan of like, what are you gonna do about that? But more importantly, you have to know why you're doing it and really understanding the weight of that, of like, I have to be a good person for not only me, but for other people. and really hammering down like what are the ideals that I'm going to be subordinate to? What are the things that I'm going to live by? What's my David, right? What's the thing that I acknowledge I'm not, but I'm going to go set out to be that and then do so heroically. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think it's profound.
And with that,
We're done!
we're finished!
We solved the world's problems.
We did.